Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into the ancient outback under the vast ink-black sky of Australia, where the stars don't just twinkle, they talk. Above you, the Milky Way stretches like a glittering highway spattered across the sky, as if someone spilled sugar in the heavens. There's a quiet here that feels older than silence itself, and as you lie back on the still warm sand, your eyes begin to trace patterns, not just constellations, but stories, trails, maps. You start to wonder, were those stars always meant to guide? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've probably looked up at the night sky before and played that awkward connect the dots game with constellations. Oh yeah, that blob of stars totally looks like a guy holding a goat. But out here, the stars aren't just wallpaper. They're guides, stories, clocks, calendars, and sometimes even characters in family drama more dramatic than a soap opera marathon. You find yourself walking along a dry red earth trail somewhere far from cell towers, traffic lights, or convenience stores. The silence around you is complete, except for the crunch of sand under your feet and the occasional call of a night bird overhead. And up there, those stars, they don't just shine. They shimmer in specific patterns. They are part of an oral map that's been in use longer than the pyramids have been around. Yeah, let that sink in. You're basically walking through a GPS system powered by starlight and song. In Aboriginal Australian culture, of which there are hundreds of diverse nations and languages, the sky is more than just up. It's a mirror of the land, a storytelling device, and if you're being honest, a pretty reliable way to avoid walking into a snake pit at night. What makes it even more surreal is that this isn't some fringe forgotten belief. Indigenous communities across the continent have been using star maps encoded into Dreamtime stories for millennia. Dreamtime is the Western label for something that's, honestly, kind of impossible to translate. It's the beginning of all things, and also the ever-present. It's both spiritual and practical. And if that's confusing, welcome to your first philosophical paradox of the evening. Dreamtime stories aren't just myths. They're history instruction manuals, survival guides, and celestial atlases, all rolled into tales about emus, serpents, canoes, and dancing sisters in the sky. Some of these stories literally walk across the sky and the earth at the same time. You'd think someone just dropped acid and invented narrative cartography. But no, this is just how deep observation and generational memory work when you don't have Netflix. One of the first things you notice is how the Milky Way seems different here. Not just brighter, but more alive. You can see shapes within the darkness, not just the light. And that's not a poetic metaphor. Some Aboriginal star patterns aren't made from stars, but from the dark spaces between stars. That's right. These people mapped the negative space in the sky. Try wrapping your sleepy little head around that. Historians still argue whether this kind of sky-based navigation evolved purely for survival, like guiding seasonal migration, or whether it held more metaphysical purposes, like maintaining spiritual harmony between land and cosmos. But you don't have to pick a side tonight. You're just a sleepy little traveler under a sky humming with meaning. You shift slightly, and a breeze brushes your face. Somewhere in the far distance, maybe 100 kilometers away, an elder is probably telling a story to children around a fire, a story that acts as a walking map. Something like, when the emu rises in the sky and points her beak west, the waterholes beyond the ironbark trees will be full. Follow her path. The kids nod. They remember. They'll tell it again later, maybe even to someone like you. Oh, and you're not hallucinating that feeling of déjà vu. The trail you're on now, it might just be a song line, a physical path across the land that matches a path across the sky. Each bend in the trail corresponds with a star, a myth, or a warning. Some even line up with natural features like rivers or boulders shaped suspiciously like ancestors who decided to turn into rocks for dramatic effect. Some Western explorers initially dismissed these dreaming tracks as folklore. You know, the usual colonial, oh how quaint attitude. Then they got lost in the bush and had to be rescued by people who could navigate by the stars and remember a 7-hour oral poem without blinking. Humbling, right? And here's the kicker. The Dreamtime maps weren't static. They evolved. As climate changed and ecosystems shifted, stories were updated with just the subtlest changes, altering a line, a verse, a gesture in a dance to accommodate new realities. You know, kind of like software updates, but with better storytelling and fewer loading screens. You pause, letting the silence pool around you again. The ground below is red and cracked, yet teeming with memory. The sky above you swirls with patterns as ancient as fire. You're beginning to see the map now, not as lines and latitude, but as a rhythm, a pulse. Each step you take, each star above you hums with a thread of connection. It's not just about where you're going. It's about how you remember the way. And tonight, just maybe those old stars will start whispering their secrets to you too. You keep walking. Well, drifting, really. The kind of gentle dream walking that only happens when you're full of starlight and red dirt and questions that don't need answers. The night air is warm, still holding the heat of a sun that really overdid it all afternoon. And beneath your feet is something you didn't notice at first, a trail that hums with purpose. It's not a hiking path. No markers, no hand-painted signs or witty plaques. It's worn smooth from centuries of feet and stories, an ancient songline etched into the land by memory, voice, and ritual. You're now literally stepping along a verse in the oldest continuous oral tradition in human history. That's right, older than the Iliad, older than the Bible, older than whatever bedtime story your grandpa told you about walking uphill both ways. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia, more than 250 distinct language groups, mapped the entire continent, not with ink or stone, but with song. Imagine singing your way from coast to coast. Each line in the melody corresponds with a natural landmark, a tree, a bend in a river, a boulder that looks like an old woman's face, and possibly is an old woman's face, depending on the dreaming story. These songs are so detailed and so reliable that some elders could sing their way across hundreds of kilometers with zero instruments, no maps, and absolutely no need for Google Earth. It's not just poetic navigation, it's practical. You sing the land, and in doing so you know where the waterholes are, where the food hides, and where the danger begins. The songs encode seasonal shifts, sacred sites, and survival tools. And if that sounds advanced, that's because it is. Western cartographers only started figuring out topography in the last few centuries. Indigenous Australians, they had an epic discography going before Stonehenge was even a concept sketch. And here's something to slow your heart down further. These songlines don't just span land, they extend into the sky. The constellations above act like street lamps marking the song's progress. So when you hear, "When the serpent coils near the waterhole and the 7 sisters rise, follow the wind from the west," you're being handed a full-blown itinerary, sky-aligned and spiritually GPS-verified. But wait, it gets even cozier. The act of singing the land is not only a method of travel, but an act of creation and maintenance. According to the dreaming, the land was sung into being by ancestral spirits, and it must be continually re-sung to remain alive and balanced. So when you hum along to the melody, don't worry. You don't have to hit the notes perfectly. You're actually helping to keep the world in tune. No pressure. Historians still argue whether these songlines function more as mnemonic devices or sacred liturgies, but either way, they're a level of environmental intimacy that makes you feel like a trespasser in your own backyard. The path beneath you shimmers faintly in your imagination, each footprint glowing with the breath of 1,000 past voices. You pause by a jagged rock formation, one that leans slightly to the east. An elder might tell you, that's where the kangaroo spirit tripped during the first hunt. You chuckle. Kangaroo slapstick, it's canon. Further along, you spot a tree shaped like a fork, its bark bleached smooth on one side. Maybe you'd pass it without a second glance during the day. But at night, with the stars aligned, it marks the turn toward a dreaming story about a traveling dingo who stole fire and left tracks in the sky. It's easy to romanticize all this, but it's worth mentioning songlines weren't created for the sake of wonder. They were survival infrastructure. In a continent where one wrong turn could mean dehydration, getting the lyrics right was a matter of life and death. Like oops, I forgot verse 4 could translate to oops, I died in the desert. And songlines didn't just stay within one language group. No, they were multilingual marvels. As a traveler passed through different territories, the song would change dialect, but keep the tune. You'd show respect by learning the local variation before entering someone else's land, kind of like switching accents at a family reunion, so Uncle Bruce doesn't call you a city slicker. Anthropologists once tried to map these songlines using Western tools, tracing the roots, plotting them on charts, but the magic kept slipping through. It's hard to pin down a trail when it bends with metaphor, weaves through time, and sings its own logic. You can't GPS a metaphor, at least not yet. And while your modern instincts might want to preserve this knowledge, Aboriginal custodians know better. These are living traditions, not museum pieces. If you record a songline but don't sing it, don't teach it, don't walk it, then it dies. And a part of the land dies with it. Still, here you are, a quiet, probably sleepy visitor. And the earth beneath you hums softly. The stars above twinkle knowingly. For a moment, it feels like the universe itself is one giant lullaby, and you're lucky enough to walk through a single stanza. You hum something under your breath. Not a songline, you don't know the words. But maybe the land hums back, as you keep moving, lulled by the rhythm of your own footsteps and the occasional chirp of a distant night critter who clearly doesn't have a bedtime. Something shifts in your awareness. You stop looking down at the trail and start glancing up more frequently. The stars, those beautiful, smug, sparkly dots, aren't just up there being decorative. They're starting to match. You squint at the night sky, tilting your head like a confused golden retriever. You're not imagining it. That bend in the trail you just passed, it lines up with that bend in the stars. That low hill in the distance, echoed by a constellation just above the horizon. And the big shape overhead shaped kind of like a stretched-out pancake with a tail, not a galaxy. Okay, maybe also a galaxy. But here, it's a celestial river. Welcome to the mirror world. Aboriginal Australians didn't just use the stars to navigate the land. They used the land to navigate the stars. You are now walking inside a two-way reflection where the earth and sky are perfect synchronized dance partners, and you're the sleepy intern trying not to step on anyone's toes. This isn't hypothetical. In many Aboriginal traditions, the land itself is mapped directly onto the constellations. The stars form landmarks. They signal rivers' paths, even boundaries between language groups. But more than that, they act like reminders, a kind of visual backup drive for the stories carried through songlines. If the lyrics fade, the stars help you remember. One of the more stunning things you realize squinting up at the southern sky is that constellations here don't always follow the Greco-Roman style. You won't hear about Cassiopeia or Andromeda having a dramatic falling out. Instead, you'll learn about spirit ancestors who crossed the land transformed into animals and then rose into the sky to watch over their descendants and occasionally meddle because apparently even in Dreamtime, no one can mind their own cosmic business. And here's a brain-tingler for you. Some of these star patterns were used to create memory palaces long before the term existed. A storyteller would point to a cluster of stars and say, "That's where Brolga danced until her feet turned into whirlwinds." That visual cue would unlock a whole sequence of instructions about wind patterns, food gathering, and what not to eat, unless you want the runs that never end. Historians still argue whether these mirrored constellations were deliberately constructed or emerged over generations of improvisation and observation. Some say it's the product of genius-level cognitive mapping. Others say, hey, maybe they just stared up a lot and got poetic. Honestly, both seem plausible. There's even a practical reason behind all this star-land matching navigation. Remember, we're talking about a people who traversed massive distances without roads, compasses, or convenient "you are here" signs. When the land starts to blur, desert sand in every direction, red hills that all look the same, your best bet is to look up. If the stars match what you remember from the story, you're on track. If not, backtrack until the heavens realign. One of the most goosebump-inducing examples comes from a site in western New South Wales where a series of rock engravings mirrors a star formation seen only during a few weeks each year. Elders say the engravings aren't just art, they're reminders of a seasonal path once traveled by ancestral beings. So if the rock lines up with the sky, it's time to pack up and move on. Like an ancient spiritual Airbnb checkout notification. You pause now mid-step and let your eyes drift skyward again. The stars aren't just twinkling, they're winking. There's a cheeky sort of mischief to it, as though they're saying, "Took you long enough to notice, mate." And down here, the hills, the trees, the dry creek beds, they're suddenly pulsing with meaning. That ridge to your left might be the spine of a serpent who drank too much moonlight. That circular stone in front of you. Perhaps the footprint of a sky being who stepped down during the dreaming, then leapt upward to become a star. You are surrounded by a terrain so rich in narrative, it makes Lord of the Rings look like a first draft. You start to wonder, how did people remember all of this? How do you encode thousands of miles of geography and astronomy into a form that even a 7-year-old can recall perfectly during a bushwalk? The answer again is story. But not just any story. These are narratives embedded with directional logic. You know the kind of tale that goes, "The turtle crossed the flat land. When the Southern Cross dipped its knee, he turned right at the gum tree when the moon was fat, and he found water where the stars made a hook." It's a bedtime story, a survival manual, and a GPS instruction all in one. And here you are miles from Wi-Fi following it like some celestial breadcrumb trail. You sit for a moment, allowing the fatigue to settle into your bones like warm sand. You don't have to go anywhere right now. You just have to be. The earth beneath you, the stars above you, the line between them thinner than a whisper. You glance up once more, and you see it, a shape above you, matching the hills ahead. No app would recognize it, but somehow you do. The sky and land both echoing with the same quiet song. You blink slowly, your eyes adjusting to the sheer blackness of the sky and the bright river of starlight flowing through it. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like someone poured a trail of stardust right above your head. You stare a little longer, and then it hits you. Wait a minute, that's not a river, that's an emu. Yes, an emu. Not a bunch of dots connected with imaginary lines like your usual "let's pretend this is a guy with a bow" kind of constellation. No, this emu is different. She's formed not from the bright stars, but from the dark patches of the Milky Way. The void between the stars, like some cosmic inkblot test, is where she hides. Her head, small and dark, rests near the Southern Cross. Her neck stretches back along the Milky Way, and her large body and legs spill westward. Once you see her, you can't unsee her. And suddenly that entire glittering sky you thought you understood is playing by a completely different set of rules. This is the emu in the sky, one of the most well-known celestial beings across many Aboriginal cultures. She isn't just a nighttime curiosity, she's a seasonal guide, a signal for hunting, and of course the star version of that one bird that refuses to be fenced in. She appears in the sky just when real emus are laying eggs. Coincidence? Not even slightly. The Yolngu people of Arnhem Land, the Kamilaroi of New South Wales, and the Burong of Victoria all speak of her, though each story has its own regional flavor. In some, she's a stubborn spirit ancestor who ran through the heavens after an argument which honestly sounds like something we've all considered doing after a family dinner. In others, she is a symbol of motherhood or patience. Her movement across the sky is tracked carefully. When her neck rises in March, the emu chicks are hatching. When her body sits low and horizontal in May, it's time to gather eggs. No calendar needed, just look up. Historians still argue whether the emu in the sky is the first recorded use of dark cloud constellations anywhere in the world. Unlike the Greeks and their shiny star friends, Aboriginal Australians were among the very few cultures to map negative space in the night sky, shapes created from the absence of light. That's like looking at a blank wall and seeing a masterpiece. Or like reading between the lines, but cosmically. You settle onto a sun-warmed rock and tilt your head back, watching the emu stretch across the sky like a shadowy myth in motion. And now that you know how to look, you begin to notice even more. A little curve of dark cloud near her legs, maybe that's a nest. A faint line trailing away from her back, possibly a path she's leaving behind echoing the one you're walking now. You half expect her to blink, and there's more. Some elders say when the emu sits upright in the sky, her eggs are protected. But when she lays flat, it's time to gather only what you need, of course. Greed is bad juju. Take too much, and you might find your next trip along the song line suspiciously unlucky. Bad weather, wrong turn, or an extremely judgmental goanna that just knows what you did. The emu in the sky is more than an astronomical marker. She's part of a deep, entangled web of story ethics and survival. By watching her movements, Aboriginal communities know when to burn the grasslands, when the fish are biting, when to rest, and when to move on. Imagine getting your entire seasonal forecast from a bird made of shadows. Beats refreshing your weather app every 10 minutes just to get rained on anyway. And here's where things get even stranger in the best way. Across multiple cultures around the world, there's no other dark constellation quite like her. There's no emu in the sky among the Greeks. The Chinese star charts didn't spot her. Medieval European astronomers missed her entirely. But here in the southern skies of Australia, she has always been there, running across the heavens, guiding, warning, and sometimes scolding. You lie back now, arms folded behind your head, and feel the tiniest pull of weightlessness. As if the sky's gravity is stronger than the Earth's tonight. You imagine yourself rising gently like the emu, your feet leaving the sand, your shoulders brushing the breeze, your body following the curve of the Milky Way. There's something deeply comforting about the idea that while cities rise and fall, wars are waged, and species come and go, the emu still runs across the stars, season after season, year after year, a constant presence in a world allergic to constancy. You glance at the dark sky again. The emu is there, steady as ever, still watching, still gliding silently overhead, like the quiet supervisor of the outback. And maybe she approves of you seeing her. You sit up slowly, a bit dusty, and definitely more humbled than when you first wandered into this great celestial puzzle. Your body is still grounded, but your thoughts, well, they've gone galloping off into the stars like the emu herself. And now your eyes drift toward a distant silhouette on the horizon. A mountain, broad-shouldered, quiet. It's not the tallest around, but something about it feels maternal, protective, that your sleepy brain tells you is Gulaga. Mount Gulaga, located on the south coast of New South Wales, is sacred to the Yuin people. She's not just a geological structure or an inconvenient obstacle for road builders. She is a mother, a creator spirit, her spirit stretching both through the land and into the sky. And as you look up, because by now you've figured out that what's on the ground is only half the story, you notice something above her. A set of stars shaped not unlike a canoe. The curve of the hull formed by a scattered arc of bright points. It's oddly symmetrical, suspiciously boat-like. And it's not there just to be pretty. The sky canoe is one of those interwoven motifs where land and cosmos do their secret handshake again. Some Aboriginal groups say that long ago, ancestral beings paddled canoes through the sky, shaping rivers and coastlines as they went. Others say the canoe now rests above us as a constant reminder of travel, of return, of where we came from, and where we must go. Kind of like a cosmic Uber, but way more symbolic and not subject to surge pricing. In Yuin tradition, Gulaga gave birth to 2 sons. One Burunguba, known to settlers as Montague Island, wanted to go live far out at sea. The other, Najanuka Little Dromedary Mountain, preferred to stay nearby. Gulaga let them go, but you can still see the physical trail between mother and sons in the ridgelines and valleys, a dreaming story literally etched into Earth's crust. Historians still argue whether the physical forms of these stories were shaped to match the land, or whether early Aboriginal artists and storytellers simply drew metaphors from natural features. But either way, the result is the same narrative terraforming guided by the sky. You start to notice how perfectly this ties together. The canoe constellation in the sky sits above a coastline filled with real canoes made of bark carved with care, pushed into the surf by generations of fisherfolk who watched the sky for signs. The same stars that once told them when to fish, when to rest, and when to sail, still sparkle silently above. They're less obvious than the Southern Cross or Orion, but that's the point. If you know what you're looking for, you see it. If you don't, well, you miss the boat entirely. Literally. You imagine a soft dawn thousands of years ago. A group of people standing on the sand preparing to launch their bark canoes. They don't check a tide chart. They check Venus the morning star and the curve of the canoe constellation. If they match a certain position in the sky, it means the mullet are running. Time to paddle. And it worked. It still works. The knowledge passed down through song and ceremony still exists, even if the coastal towns now have fish and chip shops and slightly confused tourists asking where to rent a surfboard. But for those who know, the canoe never stopped paddling across the stars. As you sit there staring at the mountain and its mirrored counterpart in the sky, you start to feel the weight of a truth so ancient it makes your phone battery anxiety feel even more ridiculous than usual. For over 60,000 years, people have walked these lands, gazed at these skies, and read them like a book. Not a short novel, either. A real epic saga with sequels and subplots and a few intense crossover episodes. You chuckle softly, imagining some future archaeologist trying to explain this to a class. Yes, class, Aboriginal Australians practiced a form of geocelestial narrative spatial mapping. No, I don't know how they memorized all that without PowerPoint. And yet it works. It's worked longer than any civilization on Earth. Longer than the invention of the wheel. Longer than most stars in your local horoscope's lineup. You glance back at Gulaga. She's silent, unchanging, but definitely watching you. The canoe above her glides quietly through the sky, and somewhere deep inside you a part of your soul wants to paddle along, to drift in time between stars and mountains guided by stories so old they've worn grooves in both earth and memory. You lie back again, pulling your jacket closer. It's a bit cooler now, and the breeze has picked up just enough to make the tall grass whisper in your ears. You listen. Maybe it's telling you something. Maybe it's just gossiping with the wind. Either way, you're content to just lie here for a little while longer, held between a mountain mother, a canoe in the sky, and a world that remembers far more than we give it credit for. You wake up from a brief doze, or maybe you never quite slept, still lying under that quilt of stars, the red dust warm against your back, the air dry and still. The emu has shifted positions in the sky, and now a new player rises along the horizon. Orion, the familiar belt of 3 stars in a row. Except out here, that trio isn't some Greek warrior with a temper problem. Nope. Out here, those stars signal it's burning time. Burning as in actual fire. Controlled, careful, ritualistic fire stick farming. Long before Europeans invented farming as they knew it, Indigenous Australians were already landscaping the continent. They used fire like a sculptor uses a chisel deliberately, thoughtfully and rhythmically, carving out ecosystems that would bloom in harmony with seasonal rhythms. Fire was not destruction. It was renewal. And the sky. The sky told them exactly when to light the match. You sit up slowly and imagine it an elder staring up at Orion as it rises just before dawn in the mid-year sky. That glow means it's time to begin controlled burns, clearing undergrowth, encouraging new shoots, making space for wallabies to graze, and drawing game animals into the open. All from a few twinkling dots above the horizon. Orion's rising, known as its heliacal rise, served as a kind of cosmic calendar reminder. Like an extremely poetic calendar alert, burn the spinifex. Ideal conditions. Bring water. In some places, this moment was marked with ceremonies. In others, it triggered quiet, practical preparation. Either way, the stars and the land were clearly in cahoots. Historians still argue whether fire stick farming should be called agriculture in the traditional sense or something entirely unique. But let's be honest, it was strategic land management based on astronomical precision, which is a lot more advanced than poke dirt, hope something grows. Indigenous Australians knew which plants needed fire to germinate. They observed how kangaroo populations moved after a burn. They saw that fresh green shoots would tempt the emus, and by extension, their eggs. The entire system was basically a symphony of fire and food, with Orion conducting. And let's just take a moment to appreciate the irony here. European settlers often viewed the land as wild and untamed, but they were walking through a carefully curated landscape, one managed through generations of observation and exact timing. In other words, it wasn't nature that was wild, it was the settlers' assumptions. You lean forward and let your fingers trail across the dusty ground. The soil here has memory. It knows fire. Not the roaring, apocalyptic kind you see on the news, but the soft, crackling, surgical kind clearing space, just enough leaving the tall trees unharmed, encouraging medicinal plants to bloom. Some elders say the fire sings when it's set at the right time, and here you are, catching the tune from the stars. Orion continues to rise, and you can just make out the faint smear of Pleiades nearby the Seven Sisters. They'll come back later, don't worry. They've got drama of their own. But for now, your attention stays grounded. You can almost smell the thin line of smoke in the air. A ceremonial fire, maybe, or a controlled burn preparing the land for kangaroo grass. Not flashy, not devastating. Just right. And it didn't stop at Orion. Other constellations served as seasonal clocks. The appearance of certain stars told communities when crocodile eggs were hatching in the north, or when fish were schooling along the coasts. Each group of stars corresponded with phenological cues, nature's timing signals. No weather app needed. No late-night meteorologist in a suit. Just you, a sky full of ancient signals, and a little bit of patience. You chuckle softly, imagining a group of elders gathered around a fire, one of them glancing up and saying, "Well, there's that rascal Orion. Time to grab the torches." Another groans. "Didn't we just do the southern patch?" To which a third replies, "Yeah, and now it's time for the northern one." Don't argue with the stars. Timeless workplace banter, honestly. Even today, some indigenous communities are working with ecologists and fire authorities to restore cultural burning practices. Turns out modern fire management is learning that maybe, just maybe, the people who lived here for 60,000 years knew what they were doing. Who knew you lie back again watching Orion slowly climb? The belt glows steady. The land breathes quiet and deep. There's a kind of knowing in the soil, in the air, in the way the stars don't just sparkle, they nudge. It's time, they say. Not in words, but in the alignment of light and shadow. A kind of cosmic nod. You take a deep breath, the air cool against your skin now. The world is still. The fire will come later. For now the stars are whispering their slow, burning lullaby. Your feet crunch softly along a new stretch of terrain, now flatter, almost unnaturally so. The stars are still your overhead companions, but your eyes drift downward. Just ahead, half buried in the dust and silence, lie rocks. Arranged, not scattered. Definitely not random. A perfect circle. Or almost perfect, considering it was laid down by hands thousands of years ago. And your brain sluggish with sleep lights up with one clear word: Stonehenge, not quite. Try Wurdi Youang. This strange little cluster of basalt boulders tucked away in the grassy volcanic plains of Victoria is one of the best-kept secrets of the Southern Hemisphere. It doesn't have massive crowds or tourism brochures with sepia-toned druid illustrations. But make no mistake, it's an astronomical tool, just as ancient, just as baffling, and arguably more accurate than anything Europe ever tossed into a field. Wurdi Youang was created by the Wathaurong people, and it's basically an indigenous star calendar carved into the land. The major stones align with the setting positions of the sun at solstices and equinoxes. Yeah, let that settle in. These boulders aren't just scenery, they're solar markers. Historians still argue whether the site was used purely for ceremonial purposes, or whether it doubled as a functional calendar for seasonal change. Some claim it's a mere coincidence, a natural fluke of rock placement. Others, including astronomers who actually study these things with lasers and long-term data logs, insist it's deliberate. The odds of those stones aligning so precisely with the sun's annual movements by accident, slightly lower than accidentally making a perfect soufflé during an earthquake. You crouch down, brushing your fingers over the smooth surface of a rock that's been warmed and cooled, rained on, and sun-drenched for centuries. There's no plaque, no neon arrow saying, "Stand here." But if you stay long enough watching the sun's path, maybe over weeks or months, maybe a full year, you'd notice how the shadows shift in careful arcs. The position of sunrise on the summer solstice lands in one notch, winter solstice in another. The equinox, that moment of balance, sits right between them. It's a sky clock built with no moving parts, no electricity, and no need for daylight saving time. Honestly, it's kind of refreshing. And Wurdi Youang isn't alone. Across Australia, there are dozens of stone arrangements, rings, lines, and crescent shapes that appear to hold astronomical significance. Some align with star risings, others seem to track lunar phases. A few even seem to follow Venus, the planet often called the morning star, which we'll get to later. Don't worry, she has her moment. But unlike Europe's ancient monuments, big, showy, and widely photographed, these indigenous structures are quieter. Subtle, not designed to impress, but to function. And they do. In fact, you start to wonder how many you've walked past already mistaking careful arrangements for random rubble, kind of like ignoring someone's handwriting because it's not in neon lights. Here's a weird little tidbit. Some of these rock formations actually double as sound chambers. Elders say certain arrangements, when sung into, produce harmonics that help carry ceremonial songs. So it's not just a stone calendar, it's an acoustic device. Yeah, your local rock pile may have better acoustics than your entire kitchen. You lie back again, the coolness of the stone soaking through your shirt, and imagine ancient astronomers, barefoot, weathered stargazers by inheritance tracking solstices with nothing but patience and sky. No apps, no telescopes, just deep time and a family of rocks pointing the way. You picture a young boy learning the stones when the sun sets between those two. In winter, we know the night will last longer. When it sets there in summer, it's time to look for berries. And all this knowledge encoded in rock placement and storyline, not tucked away in a textbook, but right out in the open. Maybe that's the part that really gets to you. These weren't hidden mysteries. They were communal, practical, and sacred all at once. Just part of the daily fabric of life. Go fishing, gather firewood, mark the stars, realign your spirit with the sun. You glance up again at the stars, now still high, still clear, and you wonder how many other calendars you've missed, how many whispers of astronomical precision have passed you by, because they didn't come with blinking lights or push notifications. Out here, the stars are reliable. The stones don't lie. And time moves not in hours but in cycles. Seasons, migrations, star paths. The world turns and the stones keep watch. You rest your head against one. It's cool, firm, timeless. And suddenly you feel very small in the best possible way. The night deepens now. A little cooler, a little quieter. The stars still hold court above, glimmering in their eternal slowness, but your attention is drawn elsewhere. Not to the sky, not to the land, but to something a little softer, more cyclical, more moody. You look up at the moon. She's bright tonight, full and round, casting a soft silver sheen across the landscape. The shadows of trees lengthen and shift like slow dancers, and it hits you she's more than just a romantic prop. To Indigenous Australians, the moon wasn't a nightlight or a pretty globe. She was a clock, a storyteller, and in some cases a warning. Among the Yolngu people of northern Australia, the moon is called Ngalindi, a man, not a woman, who was once quite round and rather lazy. According to their lore, Ngalindi's wives got fed up with his refusal to help with chores, so they attacked him with axes. As a result, he was sliced into pieces, waning to a crescent, then escaped into the sky to heal, growing full again. So yeah, the moon phases. Domestic drama in orbit. You smile imagining the earliest full moon rising and someone saying, "Watch out, Ngalindi's been lazy again." Cosmological accountability, who knew? But the moon wasn't just myth material. It was a practical guide. The Tiwi people living on Bathurst and Melville Islands observed the moon closely for predicting the tides essential for hunting and fishing. A fattening moon meant higher tides and better fish. A thinning moon meant dry sands and slow days. For a people living on islands surrounded by fickle salt water, reading the moon was as vital as breathing. And the tides were only one part of the lunar equation. The Yolengyu also performed rituals tied to the moon's phases. The Jungai custodians of knowledge taught young boys about the moon in sacred ceremonies, linking its waxing and waning to ideas of life, death, and renewal. The night sky wasn't just a passive ceiling, it was an interactive syllabus. Historians still argue whether the detailed lunar calendars used by indigenous communities were entirely oral, or if some groups used physical markers, perhaps tree carvings, perhaps notched sticks. Whatever the method, it worked. You don't survive tens of thousands of years on guesswork and wishful stargazing. You turn your eyes now to the coastal edge of the dreaming, where people used the moon not only to plan, but to celebrate. One such ceremony centers on the whale dreaming. You see whales, yes, the massive ocean-frolicking krill-chomping kind also follow patterns tied to the moon. Aboriginal communities along the southern and eastern coasts observed that whale migrations often aligned with specific lunar phases. The return of certain moon shapes signaled the return of the humpbacks and southern rites. And when the whales came, so did the stories, songs sung to the deep dances performed on the shore. Some Aboriginal groups believed that whales were the spirits of ancestors traveling across the sea to visit and then return to the stars. You picture an elder pointing to the moonlit ocean horizon and saying, "That white spray is old Uncle Jack. He always comes back when the moon is smiling wide. You smile too, because in a world so old, even whales have birthdays." Meanwhile, inland the dingo made lunar headlines of its own. You might already associate dingoes with howling at the moon. Well, that's not just Disney drama. In some dreaming stories, dingoes are linked with lunar phases, especially around hunting and birthing seasons. One myth tells of a dingo spirit who climbed into the sky to chase the moon, scratching her with his claws, hence the craters. Good boy, questionable. And the moon, ever the multitasker, also appears in dreaming paths, as a trickster, a guardian, even a bringer of floods. In certain stories, she waxes too large and causes the rivers to rise, soaking the land in punishment for forgotten rights. As always, the moral pay attention or get soggy. But not all moon lore is cautionary. In the central desert, some communities see the crescent moon as a boomerang, a tool of the sky beings, forever spinning through the stars, circling back to bring wisdom or justice, or if you're not careful, both. You imagine looking up and seeing that silver crescent not as a smiling sliver, but as a weapon mid-flight carving arcs in the sky. And maybe if you stare hard enough tonight, you'll catch it turning. You rest your head again on your pack, watching moonlight play across your hands. It's gentle now, soft, but charged with story. That brightness, someone's laughter. That shadow, a lesson. The moon is a ledger, a mirror, a memory. In Western lore, the moon's face is static, quiet, passive. Here she's never just the moon. She is Ngalindi ancestor, guide, grumpy houseguest, weeping spirit, bright-eyed timekeeper. She is watched, she is honored, she is trusted, and you right now, bathed in her glow, feel less like a visitor and more like someone being gently introduced to an ancient friend. The moon has tilted westward, now sinking ever so slightly toward the horizon, like a weary traveler bowing out of the sky. Her silver glow fades just enough for your eyes to adjust again, and in the dimming light you notice something half hidden beneath a nearby overhang. a rock shelter worn smooth by time, heat, and wind. But inside, a treasure. You shuffle closer, a sleepy archaeologist without credentials, and peer into the shadowed curve of the stone. The walls flicker with ancient pigment ochre lines, spiral shapes, faded animal prints. And there carved into the rock a strange rectangular symbol. Nestled beside it, a carefully placed wooden board, darkened with age and wrapped with sinew. It hums with history, even though it's completely silent. What you're looking at, whether you realize it or not, might be a churunga. Churunga or churinga are sacred objects of deep cultural importance among Central Australian Aboriginal groups, particularly the Arrernte people. They're often carved wooden or stone boards inscribed with complex geometric symbols, spirals, lines, dots, grooves. To the untrained eye, they look like abstract art. But to the initiated, they are records. They are maps. They are totems of identity and connection, tethered to both dreamtime and territory. Some of these carved shapes represent the paths of ancestral beings. Others may refer to waterholes, fireplaces, or places of ceremony. But many here's where your sleepy curiosity perks up are believed to align with celestial bodies. You gently rest a hand near the rock, not on it. You remember your manners and try to imagine the elder who carved that first line. Not on a whim, not for decoration, but with full understanding that this symbol would outlast them, carry their knowledge forward, bind generations together. Historians still argue whether the symbols on churunga directly correspond to star positions, or whether they operate more as metaphors for journeys and transitions. The truth, as always, might be both. But in recent years, a few elders have shared tantalizing hints. Some boards contain mirrored representations of sky paths, constellation trails woven into portable memory aids. Think of it a handheld star map passed down from ancestor to descendant, filled with sacred meaning. It's like an ancient iPad, except it doesn't need charging and can literally get you through the desert. The thing is, only those with the proper ceremonial knowledge are allowed to interpret them. Churunga are not for public consumption. In fact, many are deliberately hidden both physically and symbolically. Outsiders might be shown only surface-level meanings, while deeper truths remain with elders who carry the responsibility of preservation. You shift slightly, your knee pressing into soft earth, and notice another shape painted this time, rather than carved. A cluster of 7 dots arranged loosely like a scattering. Seems familiar. Almost like the Pleiades, the 7 sisters. Here they are again, peeking in from a cave wall, as if to say, "Miss us." You will get to know them better soon, for now just marvel at how often they pop up, across cultures, across continents, and yes, across Dreamtime stories. But more on their cosmic soap opera later. The symbols here are layered, often intentionally so. Some function as mnemonics, a way to remember verses of a songline. Others may represent complex philosophical ideas, duality, transformation, ancestry. And when combined with oral storytelling, the cave and the churunga become a classroom, a temple, and a cosmic projection screen all at once. And you're the quiet visitor at the back of the class, barely staying awake, but still absorbing more than you realize. You lean back and notice the stars above the cave now peeking in through a notch in the overhang. That notch, you realize, might not be accidental. In several sacred sites across Australia, rock shelters are aligned with star risings. During specific times of year, light from a bright star, or even the moon, will pierce through a narrow crack and illuminate a particular symbol on the wall. A silent spotlight from the heavens saying, "Now is the time." Begin the song. Imagine watching Antares, the red star in Scorpio, rise just so casting its glow directly onto a symbol of a snake on the rock. That's not coincidence. That's ceremonial timing backed by astronomical choreography. And it's been happening since before the last ice age. Some elders describe these moments as moments when the veil between realms thins, when Dreamtime and Nowtime overlap. Not spooky, just sacred. A gentle mingling, like two breaths syncing up after a long separation. And while much of this knowledge is protected rightfully, so you can still feel the weight of it even from the outside, like standing near the ocean and sensing its depth without needing to dive, you shuffle back from the cave, now leaving the symbols undisturbed, the Churunga resting quietly in its nesh. The stars above shimmer slightly, and a breeze passes by, rustling the spinifex and carrying a hint of eucalyptus and ash. You take one last look at the cave. No light inside now, no visible glow from above. But you know deeply that it's there. The connection between stone and sky. The map between stars and song. And maybe if you close your eyes just for a moment, you'll dream of it too. You've wandered so far tonight through shadowy constellations over star-lined song paths into stone calendars and moonlit ceremonies that your brain is somewhere between ancient cartographer and mildly overwhelmed stargazer. But just as you think things might settle down, the sky drops its next surprise. Because look, there they are. Again. The Seven Sisters. You remember them from earlier painted dots on a cave wall tucked beside a sacred Churunga. But now as your eyes lift toward the zenith, they're no longer symbols. They are present, real. A tight-knit cluster of stars hovering in the night, like shy gossipers who don't want to be noticed, but secretly hope you'll look anyway. You do. To Western astronomy, they're known as the Pleiades part of the Taurus constellation. To Aboriginal Australians, they are the Seven Sisters, a collection of sisters constantly pursued across the sky by a rather persistent stalker. Romantic? Not quite. Creepy? Very. Universal? Weirdly? Yes. Across hundreds of Indigenous Australian cultures, this core story repeats. Seven sisters travel the land, often being chased, often using magic, sometimes turning into birds, and always heading towards the stars to escape a male pursuer. In many traditions, the pursuer is Orion, that same star formation used to time fire stick farming. Yep. Turns out the seasonal arsonist also moonlights as a cosmic creeper. In one version, he's a hunter obsessed with the sister's beauty. In another, he's a wayward ancestor whose desire is not just romantic but symbolic, a representation of imbalance, of disturbed sacred law. The sisters fly upward to escape him, transforming into stars, while he follows endlessly rising just after them in the night sky. It's a dance of pursuit and refusal, visible almost every clear evening. And he never catches them. Not once. Historians still argue whether this myth's recurrence across multiple Aboriginal nations is due to shared origins or independent observation converging around the same star cluster. What's more baffling, this same Seven Sisters and stalker tale appears in cultures all over the globe, from Greece to India to the Americas. Always seven, always pursued, always fleeing. It's like the universe is trying to tell us something, and we keep ignoring the restraining order. And while Western astronomers note that only 6 stars are easily visible in the Pleiades cluster to the naked eye, Aboriginal lore often insists on 7. When asked why the 7th is missing, elders smile and say, "She's hiding." Naturally. You lie back in the soft grass again, arms behind your head, and let the story play out above you like some ancient planetarium show. The sisters sparkle distant, cold, beautiful, and Orion skulks behind late to the party, still trying to close the distance. But no matter how many nights pass, he never will. What's remarkable isn't just the persistence of this narrative across time, but how practical it is too. The rising of the seven sisters in the dawn sky signals the start of seasonal changes. For many communities, it marks initiation season, a sacred time of ceremonies for young boys coming into manhood. The chase in the sky mirrors challenges on Earth. To become a man, one must navigate desire, power, and boundaries without giving in to pursuit. You imagine the fire crackling at such a ceremony, the elders pointing skyward. Do you see her? Do you see them? That's what you protect. That's what you respect. The cosmos becomes a moral compass, where every glint is a lesson and every myth a whispered warning. And it's not just a chase story. In many dreaming versions, the sisters bring knowledge, healing, even plant food. In some regions, they carry sacred digging sticks used to collect yams and bush onions, tools of nourishment, not war. When the sisters rise, it's time to follow their lead and harvest the land with care. One particularly sweet variant tells of the youngest sister falling in love with a mortal. She descends to earth to be with him, and for a brief time all is well. But in the end, her sisters call her back, and she returns to the stars, leaving behind the memory of joy and sadness intertwined. A story of love lost, but also of knowing when to go home. You close your eyes for a moment and feel the breeze shift again. The stars above are clear, and you feel just a little like they're watching you. Not judging, just observing. Not unlike the sisters themselves. And somewhere in that deep, dark sky, you know the story is still playing out. Tonight, tomorrow, always. The sisters run, the hunter follows, the sky turns, and somewhere a child listens to the story again for the first time. Maybe even you. The stars have turned slightly. You didn't notice at first, too wrapped up in Seven Sisters drama, but now you realize Orion has slipped toward the west, and the Milky Way stretches overhead like a highway made of powdered light. The air is cooler now. The ground beneath you hums less like a song and more like a breath. A long exhale from a very old continent. You rise slowly and begin walking again, your steps soft on the dirt, guided more by instinct than by any trail. And as you do, you wonder something: how did they do it? How did ancient astronomers without telescopes, sextants, or even a nice pair of binoculars manage to map the heavens so accurately? The answer, well, termites. No, really. Termites. Or more precisely, termite mounds, shadow watching, and an uncanny ability to track time using only the shape of the land and the position of light. You find yourself near a wide, flat plain, dotted with irregular pillars of reddish dirt. They look like sculptures at first, some narrow, some squat, all pointing in roughly the same direction, north to south. These are magnetic termite mounds, and they're not just creepy, crawly homes. They are compasses, built with long axes aligned almost perfectly north-south to regulate internal temperature. They double as natural instruments for orientation. Indigenous Australians noticed this long ago. When the sun rose and cast its first shadows, the termite mounds gave a directional cue. So did trees, whose bark was often thicker on the southern side thanks to sun exposure. With no compasses in sight, Aboriginal trackers could determine north within seconds, then orient themselves to the sky. But wait, it gets better. Elders also used shadow sticks. Imagine planting a thin stick upright in the ground and watching the shadow it casts throughout the day. Where the shadow is shortest, that's local solar noon. Mark where the shadow begins and ends, and you've just made your own sundial. No batteries required. Combine this with seasonal star risings, and you suddenly have an annual calendar. Watch for a certain bright star to rise just before dawn. Cross-check with the shadow's direction and length. boom time to move camp, prepare for ceremony, or start controlled burns. Historians still argue whether these techniques should be called science, as if the term only belongs to laboratory coats and Latin words. But let's be honest, any system that lets you track seasons, navigate deserts, and predict animal migrations with a stick and a few stars is so scientific, it makes your smartwatch look like a toy. And the best part? This knowledge wasn't hoarded. It was lived, taught through story, ritual, and repetition. A young child might be told, "When the shadows stretch long and the dingo howls before dusk, the stars will shift. Watch for the canoe." That sentence packs astronomical, ecological, and behavioral data into one elegant bedtime warning. You try getting that kind of efficiency from a textbook. You wander further into the plain, noticing how the stars realign themselves with your every step. Some constellations now hover low, others begin to emerge from the edge of night, and somewhere ahead the emu, yes, she's back, is curling her neck downward, preparing to set. A reminder. Time is moving. One particularly curious example of indigenous stargazing comes from the Wurdi people of the Northern Territory. Their elder Bill Yidimduma Harney described how star positions were used for both navigation and law. Some constellations marked ceremony times. Others were literal reminders of rules. Cross this star, and you've crossed a cultural boundary. That's right, the sky was not only a map, but also a legal code. Imagine telling a teenager today, you broke curfew and also stepped into the wrong constellation zone. Consequences pending. Some dreaming paths were so intricate, they could only be followed when specific stars aligned. Travel too early or too late, and you risked walking into both physical and spiritual danger. Time and place had to sync up a kind of cosmic passport system where the stars stamped your permission to proceed. You pause again, staring at the horizon, where a new glow begins to rise, not dawn, but something more golden. Venus, maybe. The morning star. She'll get her own story soon. For now, she's just a glimmering promise of transition. You sit beside one of the termite mounds now glowing softly in the starlight. It's warm to the touch, residual heat from a day that saw no clouds. You wonder if the mound is still humming with termite life navigating their way through their world while you try to do the same. No telescope, no tech. Just stars, shadows, termites, and time. And somehow it all works. You look up once more. The stars above are not decorative. They are directional. They are clocks, they are calendars, they are guides, and you're learning one dreamy footstep at a time. You've been walking for hours now, or maybe just dreaming for minutes. It's hard to tell. Time in the bush doesn't tick the same way it does back home. Out here, every rock, every breeze, every star seems to hum with slow intention. The horizon has shifted again. This time your feet take you to the edge of land where the dry red soil begins to soften into sand. The faint scent of salt hangs in the air, and far ahead a silver strip glints where the ocean meets the stars. And up above, rising as if on cue, you see them. Canoes in the sky. This isn't metaphor anymore. Not just poetic dreaming. You're seeing literal star canoes constellations, shaped like the bark canoes that once glided along these very shores. Among many Aboriginal coastal communities, particularly in Arnhem Land and parts of the Torres Strait, these sky canoes don't just tell stories, they show the way. The Milky Way, that creamy ribbon you've been staring at all night, becomes the celestial river. And dotting its edge are stars shaped into boats filled with ancestral figures, hunters, fishers, even tricksters paddling eternally through the sky. You blink slowly and imagine one, a canoe formed by stars like Shola and Lesath in Scorpio. It glides silently above, steered by the spirits of ancestors who taught the first humans how to fish, how to sail, how to read the tides. Down below, the real canoes followed their path, navigating mangroves and reefs, collecting stingray and turtle. The ocean was vast, but the sky was reliable. One story tells of a young warrior who drowned at sea, his canoe overturned by a storm. His spirit rose into the sky, joining the Milky Way. Ever since, his canoe floats above, warning others of the dangers of the water, especially when the tides don't match the stars. A sad tale, yes, but also a navigational one. If his canoe appears crooked in the sky, stay ashore. Historians still argue whether this navigation system was widespread across Australia or more regional in practice. But evidence continues to accumulate patterns in the stars, matching island chains, sea currents, even reef systems. For the Yolnguo people, the sky reflects both their kinship systems and their sailing routes. A canoe constellation doesn't just point north, it also points to your obligations to fish, to teach, to protect, to remember. You watch the ocean now. Still, reflective. Then something shifts, a ripple, a shadow, a real canoe, its silhouette barely visible in the moonlight, gently rocking on the waves. You can't make out who's in it, or even if someone's in it. Maybe it's memory, maybe it's metaphor. But the stars above line up perfectly with its bow, and that's no accident. You take a few steps closer to the water. The sand is cool, kissed by a breeze that's traveled across the Coral Sea. You picture the Torres Strait Islanders, some of the finest navigators on Earth, setting sail at dusk, their eyes locked on Canopus, the second brightest star in the sky. To them, Canopus is Kila, a beacon of wisdom used to guide voyages between islands. When Kala appears directly overhead, it means you're near home. Or if you're just setting out, it tells you the route is safe. And the canoes above aren't always alone. Sometimes they are chased. Sometimes they carry sacred fire. Sometimes they flip falling stars. According to some stories, are capsized vessels. Their descent to Earth is not random. It is a message. One elder once said that watching the sky canoes at night is like watching your ancestors talk to each other across the ocean. They move, they tilt, they rise and fall, and their positions aren't just celestial data. They're social dynamics, tribal politics, cosmic check-ins. If one canoe is missing a star, it might mean a death. If another appears brighter, it might herald a birth. The ocean in front of you sighs softly, waves curling like fingers in the sand. The canoes above drift on steady and clear. You feel the deep pull of both the sea and the stars, as if they are twin mirrors reflecting not just light, but lineage. And here's a lovely twist in some stories: when a person dies, their spirit takes the canoe skyward. It joins the constellation, paddling forever alongside the elders, the warriors, the children, the story keepers. Death in this telling is not an end. It's a departure route. You glance back at the bush behind you, the termite mounds now small in the distance, then forward to the sea and the stars. Canoes above, canoes below. Tracks in the sky, tracks in the water. It's all one story. And tonight you've floated along its surface, paddling gently in thought, carried by starlight. The sea behind you settles into hush, and you begin to turn inland again, retracing your soft, sandy steps. But the sky refuses to quiet down. Just ahead of you, cresting over the horizon, with that certain bold sparkle only she possesses, rises Venus, the morning star. Bright. Impossibly bright. So bright it looks artificial, like someone left a celestial flashlight on. She doesn't twinkle, she blazes. And to many Aboriginal peoples, she doesn't just herald the day, she initiates it. Tonight, or rather this very early morning, You're standing on the threshold of one of the most intimate and sacred traditions in Aboriginal astronomy, the morning star ceremonies. To the Yolngu people of Arnhem Land, Venus is Banambur, a spirit being who guides the souls of the dead to the land of the ancestors. And when she rises just before dawn, something extraordinary happens. The Yolngu believe a thin rope of light connects Venus to the Earth, a luminous tether through which spirits' guidance and stories travel. Science would call this an optical effect, a trick of atmospheric refraction. But the Yolngu don't need a telescope to understand something deeper when Banambir shines the veil between worlds thins, and you can almost see it now, that faint glimmer, a hairline filament of brightness trailing down from Venus like a spider silk of light. You squint. Is it really there? Or just your sleepy mind hoping for magic? Doesn't matter. You follow the story. During the morning star ceremony, Yolngu communities sing and dance through the night, awaiting Venus's rise. The songs tell of ancestral journeys of spirits traveling along that light rope into the next world. A morning star pole, intricately decorated with feather tufts, shells, and string, represents Banambur. As the ceremony unfolds, it is passed from person to person, connecting participants in a ritual web of memory and continuity. And the songs, they aren't just lyrics, they are maps, each verse a waypoint, each rhythm a trajectory. The ceremony is a navigation system, both earthly and spiritual, that guides the living and honors the departed. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies should be categorized under astronomy, religion, or art. But honestly, why choose to the Yolngu? It's all one thing. The spiritual is scientific, the aesthetic is functional, the cosmos is a living being with its own family tree. You pause now, standing in the open, the morning star above you, the grass whispering underfoot. Somewhere in the distance, you imagine the faint clap of clapsticks. A voice begins a song in a language you don't know, but you somehow understand. Something about return, about light, about the string that never breaks. Banambir, in her many stories, is not just a celestial courier, she's a mediator. In some tellings, she brought the first light of dawn to Earth, marking the passage between darkness and day life, and death, ignorance, and knowledge. Her role is not flashy, it's essential. She is the bridge. In modern Western astronomy, Venus is just the second planet from the Sun. In Aboriginal cosmology, she is an active participant in your life. She speaks, she leads, she comforts, and she does something else too. She predicts. Among some desert groups, Venus's position and brightness are used to mark seasonal changes. If she appears particularly low on the horizon, a drought may be coming. If she flickers, which, yes, can happen with atmospheric distortion, it may signal trouble, a sickness, a community disruption, a broken law. The message isn't always dire. Sometimes she signals renewal, a new beginning. You sit down again, cross-legged in the grass, and feel that the world has gone very still. The birds haven't started yet. The sky is lightening, but only barely. That strange hour when night is still here, but morning is asking to come in. The morning star is your invitation. It's said that when you see Banambur at dawn, you're being reminded of your place in the world of the ancestors, watching from beyond, of the thread that connects everything. You may have wandered far tonight, through emus, whales, moon-eating dingoes, and termite-guided astronomy, but this moment, this soft pause before sunrise, this is the thread's end, or maybe its beginning. You glance up again. Venus glows unwavering, unbothered by your mortal questions. And somewhere behind your shoulder, the sky begins to soften to pink. The ceremony is ending or just beginning somewhere far from here. You're not holding a morning star pole, but you are holding something, a sense of continuity, a presence, a soft gravitational pull toward connection. You close your eyes. Let her shine. The sky is brightening now, not fully day yet, but you feel it in your bones. The stars are packing up, slipping behind the soft curtain of sunrise like actors leaving the stage. Venus lingers a little longer, ever dramatic, but even she will fade soon. You stand, stretch, and feel a strange mix of awe and quiet annoyance. Because as you piece together the richness of this night, the stories, the precision, the sheer depth of sky-based memory, you realize just how badly colonial explorers misunderstood all of it. You picture them khaki-clad, mustachioed, trudging through the bush with heavy boots and heavier egos. Some carried journals, others rifles. Most carried a deep assumption that this land was empty, unmapped, uncivilized. That's the word they loved, terra nullius, land belonging to no one. Except it wasn't. You've just spent a night walking roads older than language, listening to stars older than writing. This land was never empty. It was interwoven with paths, with knowledge, with seasonal signals and spiritual meanings so precise it'd make your GPS app weep. But colonial authorities didn't want stories, they wanted survey lines, property grids, straight borders. They built fences across dreaming tracks. They renamed mountains. They redrew the sky using Greek gods and forgot to ask who was here first. And when explorers got lost, and oh, they got so lost they rarely thought to ask the people who knew the land best. In fact, many refused to believe that indigenous guides used stars at all. One early settler wrote dismissively that Aboriginal people wander the bush in a haphazard way like animals. Meanwhile, that same settler was probably circling the same dried-up creek for the fourth time, muttering about faulty compasses. Historians still argue whether this blindness was purely arrogance or something deeper, the inability of colonial cultures to recognize non-Western intelligence systems. They saw oral history as folklore. Ceremonial maps were primitive myths. Star knowledge, coincidence. You know the usual colonial cocktail of ignorance, entitlement, and very bad sunburns. Even when indigenous trackers saved their lives literally leading search parties, finding lost livestock, interpreting weather from bird patterns, the authorities filed their names as footnotes. The stars, it seemed, were only legitimate if they came from telescopes in Europe. But of course, dreaming knowledge never stopped. It hid, yes. It quieted. It guarded itself. Some songlines fell silent, some ceremonies paused. But many kept breathing just beneath the surface in whispers passed between elders and youth, in dances performed away from prying eyes in constellations, silently tracking above a colonized continent. You pass by a ridge, now one that early surveyors once mapped without realizing it aligned perfectly with a star path. They didn't ask why it was so well trodden, just named it after someone's cousin in London. You can't help but feel a little smug on behalf of the ancestors. They were here before telescopes, before maps, before flags were stuck in soil. And they're still here, written into the shape of rivers, into termite mounds, into the songs echoing from one language group to another like messages in a bottle. Some modern astronomers are finally catching on. Collaborations between indigenous elders and scientists have uncovered lost calendars, weather predictions, even lunar tide charts more accurate than anything logged during colonial times. Turns out when you stop talking and start listening, you learn things. You pause on a small hill now, a good lookout point, the kind of place a colonial officer might have declared discovered with a dramatic name like King George's Knob. You shake your head. If they'd just asked, they'd have learned the hill already had a name, maybe 2 or 3 depending on the local dialect, and each one came with a story, a star, a purpose. And what about today, you'd think, after all that stumbling around, we'd be better listeners by now. And sure, there are signs of change. Some schools now teach indigenous astronomy. Some observatories collaborate with local communities. and elders gracious, patient, quietly undefeated, still share what they can when it's right. But even now, satellites cut across the sky without knowing which dreaming lines they cross. Cities glow so bright they drown out the stars entirely. Kids grow up with constellations named only after Hercules and Orion, never learning that a Wagalag sister also walks the sky, or that a crow ancestor once dropped fire from the Milky Way into a stone circle. And yet despite it all, the stories remain. You turn one last time to the fading stars. You think of those colonial blunders of lost expeditions, saved by the people they barely thanked, of sacred trails repaved into highways, of stone arrangements labeled natural rock features on tourist maps, of wisdom overlooked, ignored, erased, and yet somehow still alive. And you realize something both simple and profound: the stars never stopped shining. We just stopped looking properly. The sky is pale now, blue with a dash of peach. The stars have fled almost entirely, only the stubborn sliver of Venus remains clinging to her throne above the waking earth. The chirp of birds has resumed in the brush. Your breath mists gently in the morning chill. And still you're not quite ready to move. You sit on a small ridge, knees tucked to your chest, watching as the stories slip into the daylight. But even as the constellations vanish, their memory lingers, humming low under your skin. Not gone. Just quiet. Because here's the final secret the stars still whisper. They don't stop when the sun rises. They don't go on vacation in the clouds. The sky remains mapped alive even when hidden by light. Aboriginal Australians knew this. They understood that just because something isn't visible doesn't mean it's gone. Knowledge lives in layers. It rests. It waits. It whispers. You recall a story told by the Pitjantjatjara people about the Wurdi Youang, the celestial pursuer of the seven sisters. Even when the sisters are out of sight, say during a bright full moon or cloudy week, Wurdi Youang is still up there, watching, following, not seen but felt. And so the people remain aware, conscious of the energy between constellations. Astronomy in this context doesn't require eyes, it requires memory, listening. This idea that things continue even when you can't see them is echoed all over Indigenous lore. The sky beings are always present. Whether it's the canoe constellations over the ocean, the dingo claw marks in the moon, or Banambur's light string at dawn, they exist just beyond the veil of your perception, like a song you remember even after the music stops playing. Historians still argue whether modern interpretations of Indigenous astronomy should be translated into scientific terms or preserved entirely within cultural frameworks. Some believe the old stories should be integrated into planetariums and school books. Others argue that doing so risks simplifying something deeply sacred. But maybe the answer isn't to translate, it's to coexist. Let the stars speak more than one language. Let them tell many truths at once. You think of the elders who have watched the skies every night for 80, 90 years. Who can read the seasons from the color of the air? Who know when emus will lay their eggs based on a shadow falling in the right place on the right stone? These aren't just observational skills. They are relationships, bonds formed between human and cosmos over millennia, and those bonds haven't vanished. Far from it. Across Australia, efforts are underway to reclaim star knowledge. Communities are gathering stories that haven't been spoken aloud in generations. Grandchildren are walking the same songlines their great-grandparents once sang. Sky camps are being hosted where elders teach children to recognize constellations that never made it into the Western zodiac. And with each new stargazer, each new step, the old knowledge pulses back to life. You smile, thinking of a child pointing up at the night sky and saying, "Look, there's the emu running not Sagittarius, not Scorpio, but the emu. And in that simple act of naming a story is kept alive. The stars feel it, so does the land. You stand slowly brushing dust from your clothes. The sun is rising now, soft and golden. The land stretches endlessly before you, no fences in sight, just open space and quiet echoes of ancient voices. You take a final look at the sky, now almost empty of stars, but not of meaning. Somewhere up there the emu still runs, the seven sisters still flee, the morning star still shines on someone else's horizon. The constellations still walk with the earth, telling stories to those who know how to hear them. You exhale gently, and in that breath you carry it all: sky maps and songlines, stone calendars and lunar lore canoes in constellations and termites guiding the stars. And perhaps, just perhaps, the stars notice you too, this sleepy traveler who stayed up all night listening to their quiet wisdom. They whisper one last time, and you understand. Now let yourself settle. Let the air soften around you. The stories you've heard tonight, the emu, the seven sisters, the moon man, the canoe constellations, they're still drifting gently through your thoughts like leaves on a slow river. Let them. There's no need to hold on or let go. Just let them float. The sky above, though brightening now with the first brush of day, is still full, still ancient, still watching. You might not see the stars anymore, but you know where they are, and more importantly, you now know what they mean. As your breathing deepens and your body grows heavy, imagine that thin thread of light from the morning star still stretching down to earth, connecting you softly to the old stories, the old maps, the old songs. You are part of it now, not a visitor, a listener, a carrier. Feel the ground beneath you warm and steady. Feel the air cool and slow moving across your face. The world has always held this rhythm, and tonight you found your way back into it. Let the hush of ancient songlines carry you deeper now into dream, into rest, into a place where the stars do not vanish. They simply close their eyes with you. Sleep well, gentle traveler. The stories will be here when you wake.